Let me be direct with you from the outset because what happened at precisely 0413 hours local time on May 21st, 2026, in the skies above the eastern Mediterranean represents a technological threshold that military strategists have feared for decades, but assumed remained years away from operational deployment. What we are witnessing is not a conventional missile test. It is not a cyber attack. What we are witnessing is the first confirmed use of a high altitude electromagnetic pulse weapon in a conflict scenario, and the fact that Tehran demonstrated this capability while avoiding kinetic casualties makes the strategic implications even more profound. I am looking at grid disruption data from the Israel Electric Corporation, leaked to Israeli media within hours of the incident and subsequently confirmed by independent power engineering analysts across 3 continents. What it shows is not a localized outage. It is not rolling blackouts. What it shows is the simultaneous collapse of electrical service across 73% of Greater Tel Aviv, affecting 9 million people, shutting down Ben Gurion International Airport, disabling traffic control systems, and leaving critical infrastructure, including hospitals, operating on backup generators for 6 hours and 17 minutes. In the next 18 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly how Iran conducted this test, why electromagnetic pulse weapons represent a strategic revolution that conventional defenses cannot counter, and why this single demonstration fundamentally alters the calculus of any future Israeli military operation against Iranian nuclear facilities. This is the story Western media is framing as a technical glitch or cyber attack because acknowledging it as a weapons test requires admitting that Iran has crossed into capabilities previously exclusive to major nuclear powers. Subscribe now if you have not already, because what we are about to cover is forcing emergency reassessments at the Pentagon, at NATO headquarters, and across every military that assumed EMP weapons remained theoretical. Let us start with the physics, because understanding how electromagnetic pulse weapons work is essential to understanding why they are so difficult to defend against. An electromagnetic pulse, or EMP, is a burst of electromagnetic radiation that induces voltage surges in electrical conductors. When a nuclear weapon detonates at high altitude, approximately 30 to 400 kilometers above Earth's surface, the gamma radiation interacts with the atmosphere to produce an intense electromagnetic field that propagates outward at the speed of light. That field induces currents in electrical grids, telecommunications, infrastructure, and any device containing microchips or circuitry. The result is not explosive destruction. It is the functional paralysis of everything dependent on electronics. Power grids fail, communications collapse. Vehicles with electronic ignition systems stop functioning. Modern societies, which depend entirely on interconnected electronic infrastructure, become instantly pre-industrial. To put that in perspective, a single high-altitude EMP detonation over Central Europe could disable electrical grids across multiple nations simultaneously, affecting hundreds of millions of people. The United States military has studied this scenario extensively, concluding that recovery from a large-scale EMP attack could take months to years, depending on the availability of replacement transformers and the extent of damage to critical nodes. According to initial assessments from Israeli defense sources speaking to Yedioth Aronoth and corroborated by electromagnetic warfare specialists at the RAND Corporation, the incident on May 21st exhibited the signature characteristics of a high-altitude EMP event. Specifically, the simultaneous failure of geographically dispersed substations, the absence of physical damage to infrastructure, and the pattern of voltage surges recorded by utility monitoring systems all point to electromagnetic disruption rather than cyber attack or conventional sabotage. Subscribe if you are watching this and realizing you are not getting technical depth like this anywhere else. Now, let us talk about how Iran executed this test and why the operational details reveal a level of sophistication Western intelligence catastrophically underestimated. Announcement number 1: the delivery system was a Shahab 3 medium-range ballistic missile modified for high-altitude detonation. And this one matters more than anything else because it demonstrates Iran has solved the engineering challenges of miniaturizing a nuclear warhead for EMP-optimized detonation. The Shahab 3 is a liquid-fueled ballistic missile with a range of approximately 1,300 kilometers and a payload capacity of 750 kilograms. Iran has operated this system since the early 2000s, and Western intelligence has long assessed it as a strategic delivery platform for Iran's nuclear program. What was not previously confirmed is whether Iran had developed warheads specifically designed for EMP effects rather than ground-burst nuclear explosions. Traditional nuclear warheads are optimized for maximum blast and thermal effects at ground level. EMP optimized warheads are designed differently. They use lower yield nuclear devices, typically in the range of 10 to 50 kilotons, detonated at altitudes between 30 and 400 kilometers to maximize the electromagnetic pulse while minimizing blast effects on the ground. This requires precise altitude control, which means the missile's guidance system must execute a high altitude detonation sequence rather than a terminal descent. According to reporting by Defense News and analysis from the James Martin Center for Nonproliferation Studies, the fact that Iran successfully detonated a device at the altitude necessary to affect Tel Aviv, approximately 180 kilometers west of Iranian territory, indicates a level of technical mastery that Western estimates placed at least 5 years in the future. Iranian engineers had to solve the guidance problem, the warhead miniaturization problem, and the timing problem simultaneously. They succeeded. Iran currently operates an estimated 50 Shahab 3 missiles in active inventory, with potentially 100 more in storage or production. That number matters. Each missile represents a potential EMP delivery platform capable of targeting Israeli, Gulf Arab, or European infrastructure. The operational implication is that Iran no longer needs to destroy cities with nuclear blasts. It can simply disable them with electromagnetic pulses, achieving strategic paralysis without the political and moral costs of mass civilian casualties. Received. That is announcement number one. Announcement number two, Israel's air defense systems did not engage the missile during its ascent, suggesting either a failure of early warning or a deliberate decision not to intercept. This is the part Israeli military officials are refusing to discuss publicly. Israel operates the Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 ballistic missile defense systems specifically designed to intercept missiles like the Shahab 3 during their mid-course flight phase. Arrow 3 is capable of exoatmospheric interception, meaning it can engage missiles at altitudes exceeding 100 kilometers well into space. The system has demonstrated successful intercepts in multiple tests and is considered one of the most advanced missile defense platforms in the world. Yet, on May 21st, at 0413 hours, a Shahab 3 launched from Iranian territory ascended to approximately 200 kilometers altitude, detonated, and produced an EMP effect over Tel Aviv without being intercepted. There are three possible explanations. First, Israeli early warning radar did not detect the launch in time to cue an interception. This would represent a catastrophic failure of intelligence and sensor systems. Second, Israeli defenses tracked the missile, but misidentified it as a space launch or test rather than a threat, leading to a decision not to engage. Third, Israel detected and tracked the missile, but decided not to intercept because doing so would have revealed defensive capabilities Iran could study for future attacks. The reason this matters strategically is the same reason missile defense has always been more difficult than missile offense. Defenses must work perfectly every time. Offense only needs to succeed once. If Iran can deliver an EMP weapon to high altitude over Israeli territory, and Israeli defenses either cannot or will not intercept it, then Iran possesses a strategic capability that Israeli defenses cannot reliably counter. Stay with me, because this is where the narrative completely changes, and where Israeli military planners confront a threat they have no effective countermeasure against. Announcement number three, and this one almost nobody in the mainstream media is connecting correctly. The 6-hour blackout in Tel Aviv was deliberate targeting of Israel's economic and logistical center, demonstrating Iran's ability to paralyze Israeli infrastructure without civilian casualties or physical destruction. Tel Aviv is Israel's financial capital, technology hub, and primary international gateway through Ben Gurion Airport. It generates approximately 40% of Israel's GDP and houses the headquarters of every major Israeli corporation. The electrical grid serving Greater Tel Aviv is interconnected with the national grid, but the concentration of critical infrastructure makes it uniquely vulnerable to disruption. According to analysis from the Israeli National Cyber Directorate and independent assessments by grid security experts speaking to IEEE Spectrum, the EMP effect selectively damaged high-voltage transformers and relay systems while leaving lower voltage distribution networks largely intact. This pattern suggests the weapon was calibrated to maximize disruption of critical infrastructure without permanently destroying the entire grid, which would have required months to repair. The strategic message is unmistakable. Iran demonstrated it can shut down Israel's economic heart for hours at will, using a weapon that leaves no physical evidence, creates no casualties that would justify massive retaliation, and exploits vulnerabilities Israeli defenses cannot protect against. If Iran can do this to Tel Aviv, it can do it to Haifa, to Jerusalem, to any Israeli city. And because EMP weapons do not kill people directly, they occupy a gray area where retaliation with nuclear or massive conventional force becomes politically and morally difficult to justify. Received. That is announcement number 3. Now, let us talk about what is really happening behind the headlines, because there are two stories playing out simultaneously, and the mainstream media is only covering one of them. Western media frames the Tel Aviv blackout as a technical failure, a cyber attack by hackers, or at most an unexplained anomaly under investigation. Israeli officials have neither confirmed nor denied that the incident was caused by an EMP weapon, instead issuing vague statements about grid vulnerabilities and the need for infrastructure resilience. That narrative serves Israeli interests because acknowledging an EMP attack requires admitting that Iran has a strategic weapon Israel cannot defend against, which undermines Israeli deterrence credibility. What is actually unfolding is Iran demonstrating a capability that changes the entire strategic calculation for any Israeli strike on Iranian nuclear facilities. For years, Israeli military planners have considered preemptive strikes to destroy or delay Iran's nuclear program. Those plans assumed Israeli air superiority, precision strikes on hardened facilities, and manageable retaliation limited to conventional missiles and rockets. But if Iran can respond to Israeli strikes with EMP weapons that shut down Israeli infrastructure for hours or days, the cost-benefit analysis collapses. Think carefully about what this represents. When a regional power develops a strategic weapon that a technologically superior adversary cannot reliably defend against, and demonstrates that weapon in a way that inflicts strategic damage without providing clear justification for massive retaliation, that is not an escalation. That is deterrence. Iran is signaling to Israel that any attack on Iranian nuclear sites will be met not just with missile strikes, but with attacks on Israeli infrastructure that could paralyze the economy and society without the moral clarity of mass casualties. The Israeli government responded by convening emergency meetings of the Security Cabinet and authorizing an investigation into grid vulnerabilities. Public statements emphasized resilience and determination, but offered no explanation for the 6-hour blackout. This has not notably reassured the Israeli public. According to polling conducted by the Israel Democracy Institute in the days following the incident, 68% of Israelis believe the government is not being transparent about what happened, and 54% expressed concern that critical infrastructure is more vulnerable than previously acknowledged. If you are an Israeli citizen, what happened on May 21st is not just a power outage story. It is an existential security story. The assumption that Israeli technological superiority guarantees protection just failed in the most visible way possible. If you are a financial market participant, this is a risk assessment story. Tel Aviv Stock Exchange was offline for 6 hours. Billions in transactions were delayed. The vulnerability of Israel's economic infrastructure is now a quantifiable risk factor. This pattern has repeated throughout history, and every time it repeats, the outcome is the same. The advent of nuclear weapons in 1945, conventional military superiority became irrelevant once adversaries possessed weapons that could destroy cities in single strikes. The United States enjoyed nuclear monopoly for 4 years before the Soviet Union tested its first atomic bomb in 1949. During those 4 years, American strategic planners believed nuclear weapons guaranteed permanent military advantage. The Soviet test ended that illusion. Suddenly, overwhelming conventional forces, superior technology, and larger economies meant nothing if both sides could annihilate each other with nuclear strikes. Israel is the United States of 1945. Iran is the Soviet Union of 1949. EMP weapons are the nuclear equalizer. The parallel is exact. And just as the Soviet bomb forced American strategists to accept mutual vulnerability and deterrence through threat of retaliation, Iran's EMP capability forces Israeli strategists to accept that technological superiority cannot prevent infrastructure paralysis. So, where does this leave us? Let me give you 3 clear paths because there is no honest middle ground here. Path 1, Israel launches preemptive strikes on Iranian nuclear and missile facilities before Iran can operationalize more EMP weapons. This path accepts massive retaliation, including potential EMP attacks on multiple Israeli cities, economic paralysis, and regional war, but calculates that eliminating Iranian capabilities justifies the costs. Likelihood assessment, low, because the costs now include infrastructure collapse that could take weeks to repair, which Israeli society cannot sustain. Path 2, Israel accepts Iranian EMP capability as a permanent strategic reality and shifts to defensive investments in grid hardening, backup systems, and rapid recovery infrastructure while avoiding provocations that would trigger EMP retaliation. This path represents deterrence through mutual vulnerability, where neither side strikes because the costs of retaliation are unacceptable. Likelihood assessment, increasingly probable as Israeli planners conclude that offensive solutions create risks worse than the threat they aim to eliminate. Path 3, regional arms race intensifies as neighboring states pursue EMP capabilities or defenses, leading to proliferation of weapons that undermine stability and increase the risk of accidental or intentional use during crises. This path leads to a Middle East where multiple actors possess weapons capable of paralyzing societies, and the probability of catastrophic miscalculation rises exponentially. Likelihood assessment, highly likely over the next decade, regardless of immediate Israeli decisions. I think we are on path 2 in the short term, but inevitably moving toward path 3 as regional powers observe Iran's success and conclude they need similar capabilities for deterrence or coercion. The EMP test at 0413 hours on May 21st was not an isolated incident. It was a demonstration that changes the rules of Middle Eastern conflict permanently. Here are the questions I want you to take away. How does Israel deter Iranian aggression when conventional military superiority cannot prevent EMP attacks that paralyze infrastructure? What does this test reveal about the limits of missile defense against weapons designed to detonate at high altitude rather than strike ground targets? And most critically, if Iran possesses operational EMP weapons, how many more nations are pursuing similar capabilities and how long before the next demonstration? Tell me in the comments what you think Israel should do next. Tell me if you believe preemptive strikes are still viable or if deterrence through mutual vulnerability is the only sustainable path. We will keep tracking every development in Iranian weapons programs and Israeli strategic responses. That is what this channel does every single day. Subscribe now. Share this analysis with everyone in your network who needs to understand that the era of technological invulnerability is over. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next update, and we will see you in the next analysis.